Are for me, he said, firm. An order now. James's grip tightened on the wheel, a flare of anger he tamped down, his mind racing. Comply or push? He knew pushing's cost, the memory of Atlanta's cuffs biting his wrists. Is there a specific reason for that, officer? He asked, measured, testing. Hayes's eyes hardened, patience thinning. I asked you to step out. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be. The threat was sharp, and Hayes felt the rush, control snapping back, the world bending as it should, but James's calm, unshaken, unbowed, pricked at him. A splinter he couldn't pull. Hayes's mind flashed to a stop last month, a kid who'd flinched, given him the edge. This guy wasn't flinching. James exhaled, weighing it. He felt the script unspooling, the one he'd lived too often, and opened the door, stepping onto the pavement. At 6'2", he towered over Hayes, his suit crisp despite the loosened tie, his polished shoes glinting. He carried a quiet dignity, but Hayes's mind spun a different tale. Too slick, too sure, trouble brewing, hands where I can see them. Hayes ordered, gesturing to the hood. James complied, placing his palms on the warm metal, turning his head slightly. Incidents involving men in suits driving SUVs? Or does this have more to do with something else? The question cut, a jab at the absurdity, and Hayes faltered, his hand twitching near his belt, his thoughts scrambling. Why'd he say that? Watch your tone, Hayes snapped, stepping closer, pulse quickening. This guy wasn't crumbling, wasn't giving him the deference he craved, and it threw him. Most shrank. This one stared back. I'm just asking for clarity, James replied, locking eyes. Transparency, you know, no defiance, just firmness. But to Hayes, it was a gauntlet thrown, his mind reeling. Too calm, too steady, Hayes scoffed, pacing tightly, boots crunching. You seem pretty confident, he muttered, like you think you know how this ends. His control slipping, this guy's poise making him feel small, exposed. A flicker of doubt. Had he misread this? Confidence isn't the issue, James said, tilting his head. Respect is. The words landed heavy, and Hayes froze, smirk vanishing, something defensive rising. Respect? From him? His world didn't bend that way, but James's calm wasn't breaking, and it gnawed at him, his thoughts tumbling. 8 years, he'd never lost the upper hand like this. The silence crackled, and Hayes's frustration boiled. Turn around and place your hands on the hood, he said, voice tight. I need to check for weapons. A reach, he knew. Nothing screamed armed, but he needed control, needed something. James raised an eyebrow, incredulity breaking through. Weapons, he repeated, measured but edged. Do I look like someone who's carrying a weapon? Anger sparked. How many times? But he leashed it, Evelyn's voice steadying him. Don't give them the rope, his mind flashing to Chicago, the cop's hands rough, searching for nothing. Hayes's jaw clenched, composure cracking. I'm not asking again, he growled, stepping forward, hands itching to dominate, his gut churning. Why wasn't this guy breaking? James hesitated, anger, exhaustion, resignation swirling, but turned, pressed his hands to the hood, and let Hayes pat him down, rough, lingering, a bid to provoke. James didn't flinch, retreating to a quiet place. Chicago, Atlanta, now here, his thoughts a steady hum. Stay still, let it pass. Hayes felt the stillness, the lack of fear, and it fueled his irritation. You're clean, Hayes muttered, stepping back, begrudging. Disappointed, of course I am, James said, turning, eyes sharp, cutting through. Now, officer, if you're done. Not done, Hayes interrupted, voice rising, desperate to hold on. You seem to know a lot about what I can and can't do. Why? His mind racing. This guy was prepared, and it twisted his gut. A flicker of memory. Last year, a stop, a guy who'd known his rights. Hayes had won then. James folded his arms, relaxed despite the tension. I've had my fair share of interactions with law enforcement, he said. A faint weariness beneath, his thoughts drifting. Chicago cop smirking, Atlanta rookie sneering, nights spent replaying those moments, lessons in survival etched deep. Hayes's eyes narrowed. That so? You a lawyer or something? The sneer came easy, a shield for unease. James smiled faintly, amused, or something. The ambiguity stung, and Hayes bristled, irritation spiking. He stepped closer, growling, "Think you're smarter than me? Think you can talk your way out?" The need to dominate surged. It wasn't just the stop. It was personal, a test he couldn't lose, his mind flashing to Modesto, his dad's voice. "Take charge, Danny." This was his charge. James met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't think anything, officer," he said, cutting. "I just believe in fairness, and I'm not seeing it here." The words were a challenge, and Hayes took it, control slipping. His thoughts a jumble. Fairness? What did that even mean out here? Fairness? Hayes spat, stepping back. "You think fairness is what this is about? People like you always." He stopped, words choking, raw and exposed. "People like you." He hadn't meant to say it, but there it was, and James caught it, a cold realization settling. 8 years, and he'd slipped. James's posture shifted, subtle but sharp. "People like me," he repeated, soft, charged. Inside, an ache. Not surprise, just recognition. His mind drifting to Evelyn's kitchen, her stories of slights. "Finish that." Hayes's face reddened, conviction draining. "You know what I mean," he muttered, retreating. He felt the ground shift, authority unraveling, and he hated it. Hated this guy, hated himself, his thoughts scrambling. "What did I mean?" "I think I do," James said, calm turning sharp, "and this stopped being about a traffic violation a long time ago." His mind focused. This was a reckoning, a moment he'd waited for, not just for him but for every stop he'd endured. Hayes opened his mouth, but doubt flooded in. He didn't know how to proceed, his gut churning. Had he gone too far? James spoke, steady, unyielding. "Officer," James said, "it's time you know who I am. Don't care who you are." Hayes shot back, voice cracking. A lie, his mind reeling. Who could he be? James reached into his pocket, slow. "I'm reaching for my badge." "Relax." He flipped open his wallet, badge gleaming. James Carter, Director of Internal Oversight, Oakland Police Department. Hayes froze, eyes darting to the badge. Then James, searching for a lie, panic flooding. Internal Oversight, and reality sank like lead. His thoughts a storm. Oh God, no. James watched, unyielding, authority settling over him, his mind steady. "This is it, the reins, Internal Oversight?" Hayes stammered, breaking, his voice a whisper. "Yes," James said, cutting through. "I oversee officer conduct. Ensure this badge means integrity." His thoughts turning to years fighting this fight, to Evelyn's pride when he'd taken this job, now with power to act. Hayes's face paled, swagger dissolving. He'd misjudged, and it crushed him, his mind blanking. 8 years, and he'd stepped into this. James stepped forward, voice piercing. "The most troubling part, Officer Hayes?" James asked. Hayes couldn't answer, mind tangled in fear. "Not the profiling, not the escalation. It's you assuming I wouldn't know my rights, wouldn't deserve respect." "Why?" Hayes scrambled, the thought too raw. "Because you're..." But James finished it. "Because I didn't fit your idea of respect. That's a problem for everyone you stop." His mind sharp, every client he'd defended, every story Evelyn told, this was for them. Hayes's shoulders sagged, the weight landing, his thoughts a mess. "I didn't mean it. Not like that." James stepped back, voice firm. "Take a step back. Return my documents. Think about what you say next." Hayes hesitated, fight gone, and handed them over, trembling, his mind numb. "What now?" "You'll hear from me again," James added, as the man deciding if you're fit for that badge. James paused by the door, locking eyes. "The badge doesn't make you better, it makes you accountable." He drove off, leaving Hayes shattered, his thoughts a scream. Accountable? To him? Hayes watched the taillights fade, chest tight, breath shallow. He'd screwed up, royally, and dread sank in. 8 years, countless stops, and he'd never felt this exposed. People like you echoed, and he winced, knowing the cost, his mind flashing to Danny. You catch bad guys, Daddy? What would he say now? James drove in silence. Mind a storm. This wasn't new, but it was different. He had power now. Use the reins, Evelyn whispered, his thoughts churning. This wasn't over, not for Hayes, not for the department, not for the city he'd sworn to serve. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the blinds of James's office on the 5th floor of Oakland PD headquarters, cutting sharp lines across the hardwood. His coffee cold beside Hayes's file. 8 years, minor complaints, unprofessional conduct, excessive stops, all hushed. James leaned back, fingers steepled, tracing patterns. Hayes was a symptom, not the disease. His mind on Evelyn, her weary hands counting tips, her voice firm. You've got the reins now. He saw the bigger fight, a culture that let Hayes slide, that failed the Carlas, the old men. The kids stopped for nothing. Across town, Hayes sat in his cramped apartment, blinds drawn, uniform untouched, a half-empty beer in hand. He hadn't slept. Carter's badge haunting him. He wasn't a bad cop, firm, fair, he told himself, but people like you gnawed. He'd called in sick, mind a tangle of fear and defiance, his thoughts spiraling. What did it mean? A reprimand? A hearing? His career teetered, and he hated Carter, hated the mirror that badge held up. He'd built a life, Maria, Danny, a small house, and now it trembled. James's thoughts were methodical, a lawyer's precision. He'd grown up in Atlanta's rougher edges, Evelyn's lessons his armor. Respect was a fight, survival a strategy. Morehouse debates late into the night, Howard law cases dissected, a decade as an attorney. Cases lost to technicalities, victories too small, built him into this. Now he could act. Hayes's file wasn't unique, but this time it was personal, not vengeance, but purpose, a chance to shift the tide. Hayes's phone buzzed. Rico Torres, his partner of 3 years. You good, man? Rico asked, casual but probing. 32, lean, quick-witted, brown eyes sharp. Hayes grunted. Under the weather. Rico didn't buy it. He'd seen Hayes's edge, covered it sometimes. Heard you had a weird one. Rico pressed. Some suit? Hayes's jaw tightened. Word was spreading. Yeah, nothing big. He lied. The beer bitter. Rico let it drop, but his mind lingered. Hayes was off. Trouble brewing. He'd partnered with Hayes through late-night patrols, bar fights broken up, stops that felt routine. But this? This shook him. At headquarters, Marcus Green, James's assistant, knocked, a stack of reports in hand. 28, sharp, dreadlocks tied back, suit a shade less formal. Last month's misconduct summaries. Chief Nguyen wants a review. Heads up. James nodded. Set a meeting this afternoon. Marcus sensed the weight. You got it, and left, his mind buzzing. He'd taken this job to learn, to rise, and Carter was a force. Hayes drained the beer. Maria moved in the kitchen. 35, steady, her dark hair in a bun, eyes sharp with worry. She'd seen him come in late, tense. Not going in? She asked, pouring coffee. Taking a day? He muttered. She didn't push, but her mind churned. The job had hardened him, sharpened edges she'd once softened. Now something cracked. She'd married a man proud of his badge. 8 years of late nights, Danny's birth, a life carved out. But now? James opened Hayes's file. 2019, harassment over a taillight. 2022, unwarranted search. Nothing stuck. Witnesses recanted. Reports vanished. But the pattern was there. Bias a shadow. His history fueled him. Chicago, Atlanta, survival by calm. How many didn't make it? Hayes wasn't the root. Hayes's mind was a storm. Modesto's dusty streets, Dad's garage, Mom's pinched face. The force his ticket. Structure, respect, 8 years, a life. Maria, Danny. he wasn't racist. He stopped who fit, kept streets clean. But Carter's words dug in. Had he assumed? Too many stops blurred, his gut said no, but doubt crept. That afternoon, James faced Chief Laura Nguyen in a conference room, stale coffee and disinfectant in the air, 54, salt and pepper hair, steel gaze, a veteran from patrol to chief. He laid out the stop, lights to badge, his voice steady. Nguyen listened, fingers tapping, her mind guarded. She'd known Hayes's name, seen complaints, let them slide, quietly. Hayes isn't isolated, James said, it's the culture, we've handled him. Internally, Nguyen replied, her thoughts on balance, unions, morale, headlines, that's the problem. James shot back, quiet lets it fester, we need to be loud. What's your plan? She asked, leaning forward, weighing him. Full review, training, protocols, accountability. We need trust. You'll ruffle feathers, she warned, her mind flashing. Veterans, union reps, the mayor. Good, James said. It's time. Nguyen exhaled. Conflicted, she respected James, his record, resolve, but this was a minefield. Hayes wasn't her worst, but not clean, and she'd let it slide too long. James saw her hesitation, pressed. If we don't act, it's the badge. Hayes paced, Rico's call gnawing. Word was out. He thought of Danny. You catch bad guys, Daddy, what now? Maria watched, her silence heavy, her thoughts on Danny, on stability fraying. Weeks blurred. James dug into records, held forums. West Oakland, 50 people. Carla, 40, son cuffed for jaywalking, her voice shaking. An old man avoiding night drives, his eyes tired. James promised action, his mind on Evelyn. She'd fought for him, he'd fight for them. Hayes's hearing came, a sterile room, James across, Nguyen beside. A union rep fidgeting, Hayes smaller without his uniform, his lawyer arguing. Misjudgment, footage played, people like you, 60 days, retraining, a slap, James thought, but a start. Hayes's mind reeled, 60 days off. Maria's silence at home hardening. What's this mean? She'd asked. He couldn't answer, his thoughts a tangle. 8 years, and now this mark. James didn't stop, pushed Nguyen, who backed him reluctantly, her mind on fallout, unions grumbling, officers whispering. Rico, Hayes's partner, grappled with loyalty. He's internal oversight, he told Hayes over beers post-hearing. You stepped in it. Hayes glared. Rico's mind turned. Had he enabled? 32, he'd joined for justice, not this. Marcus uncovered old cases, stops buried, complaints ignored, fueling James, his ambition stoked. Hayes's home a battleground. Maria's thoughts on Danny, on leaving if it worsened. She cooked dinner, Danny chattering, Hayes staring. You okay, Daddy? Danny asked. 6, guileless. Hayes forced a smile, his mind elsewhere. Fit for that badge. James's office a war room, files stacked, data pinned. Late nights with Marcus, bigger than Hayes, Marcus said, handing a 2018 report. Another officer, same pattern, retired quietly. James nodded. Nguyen called him in. Stirring a hornet's nest, she said, her steel softening. She saw the need, feared the cost. Hayes tried to rebuild. 60 days loomed, retraining a shadow. Rico pulled back. Own it, he said. Hayes snapped. Own what? But wavered. Did he? Months later, James stood at a podium, community event, packed room, officers, council, residents. This isn't blame, he said, it's responsibility. Justice is integrity, fairness, respect. Applause roared. Hayes in back, suspended, wrestling regret. Nguyen watched, her thoughts shifting. James was right, change crept, training overhauled, protocols tightened. Rico testified, loyalty cracking. Marcus rose, Hayes returned. Quieter, Maria hoped. James drove home, jazz soft, Evelyn proud. Hayes sat with Danny, a rare smile, grudging respect for Carter. Change wasn't done, but it began. The sun dipped low over Oakland on a Tuesday evening in late April 2025, its golden rays bleeding into the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow across the city's jagged skyline, and in East Oakland, where cracked asphalt streets buzzed faintly with the hum of cars, the distant wail of a siren, and the murmur of voices drifting from stoops and corner stores, James Carter guided his black Toyota Highlander through the thinning traffic, the SUV's engine purring softly beneath him, while Jazz, Mile Davis's mournful trumpet, spilled from the radio, threading through the cab like a fragile shield against the weight of a day that had stretched too long. James, a broad-shouldered man of 42 with skin the color of deep mahogany, wore a tailored gray suit now softened by a loosened tie and a jacket tossed carelessly over the passenger seat, his dark eyes, etched with faint lines of fatigue, scanning the road as he adjusted the volume, seeking a moment's reprieve after 10 hours buried in the bureaucratic mire of his office as the Director of Internal Oversight for the Oakland Police Department, a role he'd taken after years of fighting from the outside. James carried a quiet strength forged in a life that demanded resilience. Born in Atlanta to Evelyn Carter, a single mother who'd juggled nursing shifts and cashier gigs to keep him fed and schooled, her voice still echoing in his mind. "Hold your head up, James. But don't give them the rope to hang you with," a mantra that had carried him through Morehouse College, through law school at Howard, through a decade as a civil rights attorney tilting at windmills he knew wouldn't fully fall, and now, in Oakland, he wielded a sharper blade, one he'd honed to cut through the rot he'd observed from the margins. His early years in Atlanta had been a crucible, Evelyn's small apartment a sanctuary of worn furniture and fierce love, her hands rough from work but gentle when she'd tuck him in, telling him stories of her own battles, racism in the hospital wards, exhaustion at the checkout line, instilling in him a fire to rise above. He'd excelled at Morehouse, debated late into the night with classmates about justice, then at Howard sharpened his legal mind, clerking for judges who'd seen the same struggles. His attorney years were a grind, cases lost to technicalities, victories too small to shift the tide, but they'd built him into this, a man who could sit in an office overlooking Oakland and dream of dismantling a system brick by brick. Tonight, though, his ambitions narrowed to the simple: reach his apartment, pour a bourbon, let the day's tension unravel. He approached a yellow light at a quiet intersection, easing off the gas with the precision of a man who'd learned to leave no room for error, the Highlander coasting to a stop just as the light flicked red, tires whispering against the pavement, James exhaling a small triumph, until the rearview mirror flared with blue and red, a sharp siren slicing through the jazz, his stomach tightening with an old, visceral knot. He'd been driving since 16, and these moments were etched into him, never just a taillight or a rolling stop, not for a black man in a suit navigating a city like Oakland, his mind flickering to Chicago, 2009, a cop dumping his briefcase, smirking as he searched for drugs that weren't there, the cold metal of the car hood against his palms as he stood silent. To Atlanta, 2015, a rookie cuffing him for resisting when he'd asked why he'd been stopped, the sting of steel on his wrists a bitter lesson. He adjusted the mirror, watching the police cruiser settle behind him, and turned the radio down, rolling his window halfway with a steady hand, his heart thudding but his face a mask, Evelyn's voice steadying him. "Keep your head." Across the asphalt, Officer Daniel Hayes emerged from the cruiser, his boots striking the ground with a deliberate thud. At 37, Hayes was stocky, his crew cut sharpening the blunt angles of his face, his badge glinting under the streetlights, his uniform crisp, his belt heavy with gear, handcuffs, flashlight, holstered Glock, and he moved with a swagger honed over 8 years on the force, a confidence that the world bent to his will more often than not. Tonight he was restless, his shift a slog of noise, complaints and petty disputes, the monotony clawing at him. He'd clocked the Highlander easing through the light. A vague infraction, maybe, if he stretched it, and something about the driver pricked at him, the suit, the calm, the SUV that didn't fit the usual chaos he chased. Hayes adjusted his belt, fingers brushing the holster, and approached with the assurance of a man who'd never doubted his place. His own history shaped him differently. Raised in Modesto, a working-class kid, his dad a mechanic with grease-stained hands, his mom a clerk who'd counted pennies. The force had been his escape, a badge that gave him power, respect, a life he'd built with Maria, his wife, and Danny, his 6-year-old son. 8 years had hardened him, taught him to trust his gut, to lean into the profiles that kept streets clean. He wasn't a bad cop, he told himself, just firm, just sure. License and registration, Hayes said, reaching the window, his voice flat, clipped, a command worn smooth by repetition. He peered inside, blue eyes narrowing as they took in James, broad shoulders, polished demeanor. A man who didn't match the profiles Hayes knew, kids with sagging pants, twitchy drivers with warrants. It unsettled him, a splinter he couldn't name. James nodded, his movements slow, deliberate, hands visible, no sudden jerks. He'd danced this dance too many times, knew the script: stay calm, comply, don't give them a reason. He reached for his wallet on the dash, slid out his license, then leaned to the glove box for the registration, all while Hayes's gaze bore into him. Heavy with scrutiny, James handed the papers over, his voice even, polite but firm. Here you go, officer. Inside, he braced, a familiar tension coiling, waiting for the turn he knew was coming, his mind a tightrope between control and the simmering anger of too many stops like this. Hayes took them without a word, stepping back to scan them under his flashlight, the silence stretching, broken only by the crackle of his radio and the Highlander's hum, his mind churning. Too composed, this guy, too controlled. Most people fidgeted, stammered, gave him an edge to press, not this one. Hayes leaned in again, elbow on the window frame, his tone sharpening. Do you know why I pulled you over? His gut told him to push, to find the crack. James met his gaze briefly, then looked ahead. I'm not sure, he said, steady. I stopped at the light. He replayed it, yellow to red, a clean stop, but kept that lock down. No use arguing yet, his thoughts flickering to Evelyn's kitchen, her tired eyes warning him. They'll look for a fight. You didn't stop fully, Hayes replied. Though doubt flickered in his gut, had he? The light had changed, sure, but maybe. He shoved it aside, rolled through just as it turned red, his voice carrying a challenge, daring a pushback he could seize. James frowned, a ripple of frustration beneath his calm. He'd been careful, always was, but he nodded. I thought I slowed enough, but I understand. His tone balanced politeness and resolve, and it grated on Hayes, who couldn't pin why it stung so much, a vague unease twisting. Why wasn't this guy rattled? Hayes didn't reply immediately, his eyes narrowing as he studied James, the suit, the SUV, the quiet confidence. It didn't fit. This wasn't routine anymore. It was personal, a puzzle Hayes needed to crack. His posture stiffened, suspicion taking root. You're not from around here, are you? He asked, glancing at the license. James paused, calculating. I moved here a few months ago, he said. My address is on the license. His voice stayed level, but he felt the shift, Hayes's questions turning. The edge creeping in. He'd seen it before, the moment judgment hardened, his mind drifting to a night in Chicago, the cop's smirk as he'd said, you don't belong here. Hayes barely looked at the address. Where were you headed in such a rush? He pressed, his tone harder, fishing for a crack, his mind spinning. This guy wasn't nervous, wasn't breaking, and it threw him. He needed something to latch onto, to justify the itch. Just home, James said. Simple, steady, the air thickening, charged with unspoken weight. Hayes didn't see a man driving home. He saw a threat, a shadow he couldn't place. It wasn't rational, but Hayes trusted his gut, and his gut screamed trouble. James felt it too, the old, familiar gaze, the one that stripped him down to a stereotype, and his mother's voice whispered, keep your head, James. Hayes stepped back, folding the documents with slow, exaggerated care, then tucked them into his chest pocket, a smirk tugging at his lips, masking the unease bubbling beneath. Step out of the CA.